Hello there, everybody. My name's Kevin May. I'm the editor and co-founder of Tnooz.com. Welcome to another Tnooz webinar here today, produced this time in association with Monetate. We're delighted to have them on board. I met them in Phoenix at the Focusrite conference last year, and these guys are really doing some interesting things. So we're delighted to be producing this particular webinar with them today. So I'm here based in the UK, and we have a panel that's in San Francisco and Milwaukee, and I'm also joined as always by Quinn, who's the CEO and my business partner, co-founder here at Tnooz. He's in Connecticut on the East Coast. So what we wanted to do under the grand title of transforming the supplier-driven travel booking experience is look really about how this is all starting to evolve. How is it shaking out? Because we've gone way past the days of talking about the travel journey. What's really important to travel businesses now is how can they maximize the touch points that they have with potential customers throughout that entire process, in particular driving ancillary revenues through the various stages of the consumer funnel, as they sometimes call it. So in particular, how do airlines, hotels, cruise lines, other suppliers connect the increasing levels of data that they're able to capture about their customers, and the knowledge really about that traveler to push the right offer to them at the right time. So what you're going to do over the next 60 minutes or so is learn about some of those kind of upsell opportunities with relation to merchandising and some other kind of best practices. So we have a supreme panel here with us this afternoon. It's the afternoon here for me in the UK. It's the morning for many of you in the US. We are joined by Robert Cole, who's the founder of RockCheetah, an extremely clever chap, mostly concentrating on hospitality consultancy. And we're also joined by the Chief Marketing Officer of Monetate. That's a fine fellow also by the name of Heinemann. He's the chap that's in San Francisco. Robert is in Milwaukee. So a little bit of housekeeping first of all. As always, we are recording the entire show for you this afternoon. We'll be hoping to put that live on tnooz.com within the next 12 hours or so, depending on how quickly YouTube takes to process the file, as always. And also all the slides that you're about to see will also be hosted on SlideShare, and we'll also embed that in the post on tnooz.com at exactly the same time. So fear not if you have to dip out for a little while, or you have to go to a meeting, or you therefore want to share what you've heard with some of your colleagues. You will be able to do so by sending them the link to the article later on today. So also we have a question facility, so we will get to a Q&A at the end of the webinar. As always, what you can do is submit your questions as always through the question button that's on the right hand side of your module on the screen now. So feel free to send questions at any time and we'll get to them, and you can agree, disagree, make a point, ask a particular question to either Rob or to Kurt during the Q&A. Also, we have, as always, again, a series of polls that we use to try and gauge the temperature of the audience about the particular topic in hand. So we're just going to do the first poll, and then I'll introduce Jean for a quick discussion. So the first poll, just to familiarize yourself with the system, is very simple. I hope it's very simple. Where are you located? Pick one of those four, if you could, please, everybody. Okay, I can see you're all very quick off the mark today because it tells me exactly how many as a percentage of you have voted. So very simple question, just to warm you all up. And let's have those results there, Jean, please. So 2/3 of you are in North America today, so good morning to you in North America. 27% of you are in EMEA, 3% Latin America, and 4% of you in Asia Pacific. Not a huge surprise on the Asia Pacific one, as always, given the time of the day it is. So thank you very much for that one. And a second poll straight away, just to kind of get a sense of what you're doing in those particular regions. So let's have the second poll there, Jean. So which business segment do you represent? Airline or air transport, hospitality, obviously including hotels, other travel supplier, cruise, car rental? Or are you in the intermediary or distributor space, or other, or technology solution, or a consultant? So please, if you can vote for one of those five, please. You're all voting very quickly again. Once I suspect that's because the question isn't particularly difficult. Right, let's have the answers again then, Jean, please. Just 7% of you in the airline industry, almost a quarter or just over a fifth of you in the hotel space, other suppliers, so obviously dominated by hoteliers today on the supplier side, about 1 in 5 of you intermediaries or distributors, and almost 50% of you, just 3% under at 47, are technology solutions consultants or others. So thank you very much everybody for voting. Now, the premise of this, as I said in the introduction, is to really kind of get a sense of where people are. So we wanted to kick things off, first of all, with a final poll here, just to kind of get a temperature check, let's just call it that, where you see this kind of particular subject. So let's have that third poll there. At which phase in the traveller's decision process are you primarily engaging customers with offers? Inspiration, research, planning, the validation part, or post-trip? So you're all voting slightly slower now because you need to have a think about it, which is fine. Okay. Some interesting results here. Primarily engaging customers is the key part here. So if we can have those results up, Jean, that would be great. So no majority winner, but almost, with 49%, is the planning phase. Inspiration and research phase is 18 and 19% respectively. Validation 11%. Post-trip. By post-trip we mean, are you trying to hit offers to people as they return with your CRM and things like that? So 4% for the post-trip. Now, what I wanted to do was just introduce Gene Quinn. Many of you know Gene. He's obviously, as I said, my co-founder here at Tnooz.com. And we just wanted to kind of like discuss very briefly the results of that poll. I mean, Gene, good morning to you there in Connecticut.
Hi, Kevin. How are you today?
I'm very well, sir. So, 49%. Does that particularly surprise you? It doesn't really me. I mean, that's really the kind of the key area. I think that most people are still trying to hit people with offers.
Sure. And before we get into a brief chat here, let me just disclose that in addition to being the co-founder and CEO of Tnooz, I'm also on the advisory board at Monetate, and just wanted to be transparent about that. But I think this is actually a great setup for what we're going to hear from not only Kurt later at Monetate, but Robert Cole, who has been a long-time observer of how the online booking, how the online booking process has become to be not only a full channel in the distribution of travel, but has really presided over the fundamental change in the way travel's been distributed in the last 15 or 20 years, from the agent-driven network to the consumer-empowered network, which includes a much higher emphasis on supplier direct choice. So it doesn't surprise me that most merchandisers are still in the middle of what their business is, and that's selling travel. So their websites or their offers or their businesses are designed to catch the traveler at the optimum point where they're ready to buy. I think what we're going to hear more of today, and what we've been writing about a lot, Kev, over the last couple of years since the launch of Tnooz, is how there are so many more points of interest that consumers have and that merchandisers want to have in attracting and retaining customers. It really comes down to, how do you attract a customer to you? And then your business will be further based on how you retain that customer relationship. Previously, it was through rather flat relationships you had through loyalty programs, but customers are fickle. Many of them view the transaction as a commodity. So they're looking to be continually engaged, and they're more than willing to tell them a lot about yourself, about themselves, if you're willing to listen. So I think that's pretty much what those results reflect today. Most people think of selling travel when people want to buy it, as opposed to selling them at other optimum points when they're thinking about it but don't have their credit card out.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's the interesting point in this before we dive into Robert's discussion here. And I thank Trina Coates for already finding the question button here, because she said, they actually try to they actually try to engage every step of the process. Although we did ask for the primary one, it's interesting that people are already thinking about the best ways to do it and are trying to capture at every single point along that purchase funnel. That wasn't a question. That was that was just me making a point. So thanks ever so much, Gene. So what I'm going to do now is, like I said, we've got two particular presentations here from Robert and Kurt. So first of all is Robert Cole. As I said, he's from and is indeed the owner of RockCheetah. He's in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, and he's going to kind of bring this from his perspective before we get to Kurt at Monetate's ideas around this kind of travel journey and how to maximize it. So, Robert, good morning to you in Milwaukee. I hope you're well, and I'm now going to hand the floor over to you, sir.
Great. Well, good morning, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin and Gene. It's a pleasure, certainly, to be on another Tnooz webinar. Today, what I'd really like to talk about is a subject that impacts virtually everything a brand does online. It involves site architecture, navigation, content strategy, and customer messaging. And I guess since Gene did full disclosure, I'll do full disclosure. I'm a big fan of what Monetate does as well. And I think during Kurt's section, you'll see how a lot of this is being applied. But what I'm going to do is kind of set the table and put the framework for it. So Gene, if we could have the next slide, we'll get right into it. The essence of this webinar is really, I believe, understanding the traveler and then effectively acting on that understanding. So I'll be covering the following three areas. The first is a 7-step travel cycle. Because if you don't clearly understand how you play across the spectrum of the traveler's decision process, you really run the risk of being irrelevant, and irrelevance is really the kiss of death now in terms of working directly with consumers, particularly as a supplier. There's so many other alternatives, particularly in the hospitality space. The next are the different types of transactions. There are lots of different ways that you can sell product to it, and maximizing the sales and profitability is heavily dependent on what you're selling that traveler. And then finally is really conversion to loyalty, transitioning people at one point that you've perhaps never met into loyal repeat customers. So next slide, please, Gene. So let's take a look at this 7-step process. 15 years ago, when things were just really kind of getting rolling online, it was a 3-step process. And about 5 years ago, folks kind of decided it was a 5-step process. I kind of look at the travelers as being more sophisticated, so I've been sticking with 7 steps for quite a while now. Google frequently cites that the average traveler visits about 22 travel-related sites during about 10 sessions before booking. So there's a lot involved in this process. Simply put, if you don't know where you are in the process, you really have a problem, because the only way to be relevant is to be tied in with the proper step of the process. So let's take a look at the various stages. Inspiration, that's really why that trip is being taken. And I'm not sure how many folks and sites really ask that question, understand that question for how people are working with them or where they are in the process. This is obviously the target of Expedia's great Get Yours campaign, trying to create an emotional connection between the traveler and the experience. Through this, maybe we can use an example of a honeymoon couple. I work with a honeymoon site rather extensively. Honeymooners want imagery of couples and romantic surroundings. They don't necessarily want to see families, seniors, or architectural shots of hotel exteriors. So if that's what you have on your site, how do you appeal to a honeymooner who's looking for inspiration on where to go? So definitely the case on inspiration is one size does not fit all. Next step is research. Which I really look at is all about where they're going. It's really the traveler evaluating all these macro alternatives and constraints: location, budget, time, the interests, especially if there are multiple people traveling in a party. In the case of honeymooners, it's a great situation. If a honeymooner's seeking a beach, they suddenly discover exactly where the Seychelles and Fiji are located, while suddenly instantaneously realizing it's too expensive and time-consuming to get there. So it's that sort of phase where they're really trying to figure out where do I go, what are my options, particularly for leisure travel. Certainly with corporate, other people may be making the decisions for them, and it may not be as extensive of a phase. I separate planning from research. because the planning I look at is much more in terms of the micro logistics. It really pertains to the how aspect. Again, for honeymooners, let's say they're headed to Hawaii. They might be considering Maui, and they're trying to figure out if staying in Hana works out with whale watching in Lahaina, after biking down Haleakala, taking a helicopter tour of Kauai's Nepali coast, seeing lava on Kilauea, which is on the Big Island. All those sorts of things. How do they fit all of that together in terms of a micro perspective? What hotel gives them the best option? What activities and sorts of features can they participate in, which really gives them the best overall experience? Next step is validation, which is really the who aspect. Who endorses this decision? Gene mentioned the change from online, from the travel agency scenario that was so dominant for so long, and still is very, very important in many, many aspects of the travel industry. But that is really the validation. A good quality travel agent is a great authority who can tell you that you are not messing up your trip, which is a tremendously important aspect for people. But now it's really TripAdvisors, they got blogs, guidebooks, social circles, and it's a traveler really playing a game of who do you trust when it comes down to these decisions to really validate they're making the right decision. So then finally they get along to the booking process, which I look at as involved as, do they have product available? Is the price still there? What is the best time to book? Because the pricing is dynamic and changing. And of course, if the pricing or inventory availability does suddenly change, they may have to restart their process. Finally, through all of that, the poor traveler finally gets to take their trip. And again, this is a great way for travelers to capture ancillary revenue and to stay relevant, is to actually continue that relationship and be able to sell things after that booking is made. There are big revenues and margins available for all those in-destination activities. And again, I think some groups are trying to get into that, but it's it's a little tricky. Some folks are just focused on making the booking and it's gone, and they're leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. For honeymooners, also just continuing that example, some never want to leave the hotel suite, so maybe that's not a big opportunity. Others want to have everything planned in advance. They want to see everything in the destination, and others may not want to plan in advance at all. They may just want to figure it out when they're in destination. So that gets more into personas, which I'm not really going to be covering, but I think Kurt will be handling. And then finally the sharing, which is really why others should go there, and then that really closes the loop. So now with Pinterest, YouTube, Instagram, that sort of thing, sharing is becoming much more visual and audio-visual. So the sharing of the honeymoon photos, videos, reviews, that sort of thing suddenly leads to the inspiration of others, and the cycle continues. So next slide, please, Gene. Thanks. It's also important, so now we know the different phases, to look at the different types of travel transactions. So and many of these have survived the test of time. The first one, the standalone travel product, I think started about 2,300 years ago, which was in Roman highways, which was getting a bed for the night. And kind of ironically, that was the target of Travel 1.0. It was easy to book, low-hanging fruit, single component. I need an airline ticket, a hotel, I need a car. That was it. Another one, many, many years later, I kind of look at 1907, Ellsworth Statler, the father of the modern hotel in the Buffalo Hilton, decided to put in private bathrooms, which was rather revolutionary, and all of a sudden he was selling a room and a bath for $1.50. And so maybe he was the first value-added combiner there in the travel industry. But it was really a more modern concept would be providing breakfast, free internet, that sort of thing. If it's a resort, meal programs, golf, spa packages. And unfortunately, travel sites are generally pretty bad at providing comparisons between products with all these different value adds. And don't get me started on kind of some of these resort fees, which don't really offer a whole lot for hotels. I'll save that for another webinar. Another aspect, actually, which predated kind of those value-added combinations, is the bundled purchase. That was, I look at 1840s, Thomas Cook started with train excursions. All of a sudden, he was involved in multiple suppliers, train tickets, lodging, activities, and that really still remains today somewhat the current practice of wholesale and travel packaging. So And I think Dara from Expedia, at the Focusrite conference mentioned that that was going to be a major focus of what Expedia was going to be working on this year was their travel packaging. So obviously trying to expand out the amount of capture of their revenues. The fourth stage, dynamic packaging, an area close to my heart. I was involved with Neat Group, which we provided dynamic packaging in 2001. Launched for kind of the first ones in the industry for provided packaging for Orbitz, United, Marriott, variety of groups. And it was true dynamic packaging, not just combining components. So a little bit different from the bundled purchase. The technology was rules-based, so it created air, hotel, car combinations, but the interesting aspect was that supplier rules resulted in different pricing on different sites. So you could have an Orbitz, United, Marriott, Hertz package, and it might be priced very differently on Orbitz versus United versus Marriott, that sort of thing. The next stage, or next aspect, not really a stage, excuse me, is sequential packaging. I was involved with this when I was at Budget Rent-A-Car. We did a deal with Priceline, which was great. Priceline sold a lot of air tickets, and we decided to do a time-fused budget rental car offer on the confirmation email. So we kind of joked, would you like fries with that? But very, very high value offer, outrageously high conversion. Was very, very relevant to the people traveling who were getting those airline tickets on Priceline. The next one, distributed packaging, is something I think is in the future. It's going to happen within the next decade. Somewhat relies on a resurgence of true dynamic packaging. And quite honestly, I don't think the travel industry is quite ready for it yet. So anybody who is interested, talk to me about it, and we'll see if we can go build it. But there is another layer out there which I think can really do something very, very interesting in terms of combining products together. So next slide, Gene. And here we have the fries. So in terms of these revenue opportunities, there really are a variety of aspects here. Maybe we can use a cruise example for this. Certainly the sales transaction, you can sell a cabin on a cruise ship, and that's great. But cruise companies are very, very good at maximizing their revenues. So what do? They certainly try to sell higher category cabins. They'll sell multiple cabins. Hey, get a second cabin for the kids if it happens to be a family, that sort of thing. They'll even do some things if they have, because of holiday weeks and things like that, they'll do things like increasing the duration, extending the cruise by a week for X dollars per person per night, sort of thing. Or even rebooking the same cruise or a different cruise at a discount for the next year when the people are still on the cruise ship and having a terrific time. Great opportunity for them to sell. So again, all sorts of different opportunities with actually just a traditional sales transaction. You also have ancillary product sales. So again, with a cruise ship, you have specialty restaurants, beverage promotions, excursions, the casino, shopping arcades, all those sorts of things, which are just products that they fundamentally control themselves, or they can bundle it with related products. They sell air combinations, luggage shipping, port transfers, all sorts of things that help people get to and from the ship before they go. And then really the bottom line though is when you're selling these ancillary products, how do you maximize that lifetime customer value? I think that's really the key. And the travel seller must really consistently create value and remain relevant throughout this process, which fundamentally I look at is saving the traveler time, saving them money, enhancing their travel experience, or helping them increase their influence. Because in many cases, some of these programs I see some groups are doing very well with, where they'll say, hey, invite a friend. You went on a great vacation to a resort. Go and tell your friends about it, and they'll get a deal for their trip, and perhaps give the referrer a discount on their return stay as well. Gene, next slide, please. So going through from now conversion to loyalty, again, you have another variety of stages here, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. It's really, you start off with a stranger who may be a visitor to a website, and certainly SEO, paid search, that sort of thing. Hopefully you can get them to the site and they don't bounce. Next is really converting that visitor into a shopper, which I think now a lot of folks certainly looking at social influence, things like that, shared attribution of what is influencing people to come to those sites, all those sites that people have bounced around, what facets those took in terms of bringing them to the actual website to transact. Then, most importantly, converting that shopper to a first-time customer. Obviously, booking conversion is critical. Can certainly do that through the sucker is born every minute approach. But I think it's, if you're looking at long-term value, really providing legitimate value, which is consistent with the brand image, is the key. Then, certainly the best expense that I recommend for my clients is how you convert that first-time customer into a returning customer. That should be one of the most cost-effective methods to employ, and that really is a challenge for deeply discounted channels. So some of the folks who decide to go use the Priceline, Hotwire, that sort of thing, to go sell their hotel, that's great. That can drive a sales transaction. But how many travelers are willing to return for a second visit when they suddenly need to pay retail price? So there are different ways that you can draw people in, but how do you really keep them? So, and that's really where the next stage comes to, with converting a returning customer to a repeat customer. All of a sudden, frequency versus recognition versus loyalty programs are slightly different. And I think Gene alluded to that, of kind of the flat frequent flyer program. They now have to mean a little bit more, and I believe as you start seeing airlines introducing spending requirements on top of segments and mileage, some behaviors might change. There might be some opportunities for people to kind of hop in where normally the airlines had some things fairly locked up. I would argue that repeat customers patronize websites and travel suppliers, providing the greatest personal value to themselves. So it really is, I believe, sufficient learning about the traveler through their previous website visits, purchases, and travel experiences to personalize that opportunity. And I think that's where Monetate can step in and certainly speak to that point. So the question is a repeat customer a loyal customer? The question is, what is motivating that traveler to return? And I believe that's tied to those earlier steps in the travel process, the inspiration, research, and planning, and how you can close that loop with your whole experience. So finally, in closing, a little philosophical note that loyalty is really based on the customer's ability to identify with that brand, which requires a perception of kind of a shared sensibility that you're both working together toward the common goal of benefiting that customer. So, do brands' products satisfy customer needs? Sure, lots of other brands do that. But does your brand truly understand and anticipate the needs of your customer? Not that many travel brands can really claim that capability. So loyalty isn't really selling someone a product at a discount. It's a customer who willingly pays a premium price for a product that is truly loyal. It may not be the best deal, but it provides them with the best value. And if you want a good example of that, I think you maybe look outside of the travel area and you ask Apple exactly how that works. So that wraps it up for me, and I think time to head over to Kurt and the Monetate side.
Okay, thanks ever so much, Robert. It's Kevin here. Brilliant as always. Thank you so much for kind of like setting the scene. We've got some questions started coming in already. Just a reminder to everybody else that you can send your questions in for our panel for the Q&A at the end of the session, simply by hitting the question button, which should be on the right-hand side of your viewing screen. So, before we hand over to Kurt, we thought we'd just do one more poll, which is, thank you, Gene. To what degree are you using real-time customer data? So we get a sense now we're really going to start drilling into this. So please, if you can cast your votes. Yeah. Slower to respond now, which is fine. Something to think about. Okay, and there's a stat here that I imagine will please Monetate no end. And I think we can probably throw those results up now. In all the years that we've been running Tnooz webinars, I don't think I've ever seen such a tightly matched set of results. So the majority, or the majority of voters here, 35%, say none at all. 32% each. Basic web marketing, IP addresses, operating system, browser type, and once again, just almost a third of you enhanced disciplines, cookie tracking, geo-targeting. So that 35%, none at all. Listen up for the next 10-15 minutes, because I'm hoping, and I indeed know, that Monetate can speak on this in a very expert way. So if you can close down that, and I'm going to hand over straight away to Kurt from Monetate, who is in San Francisco this morning. So Kurt, very early good morning to you. It is still breakfast time over there in California, so thank you very much. And I'm going to hand over to you. The floor is yours now, Kurt. Looking forward to hearing what you've got to say, sir.
Thanks much, Kevin. And thank you, Robert, for the setup as well. The data that came back from that survey was insightful. Needless to say, if approximately a third of you aren't really targeting based on real-time data, that's a big opportunity for your business. And for those of you who are doing it on geo and everything else, congratulations. You're definitely ahead of the curve. Slide. So, obviously, if you want to transform an experience, you need to use some form of analytics. But there's a lot of challenges that are going on with marketing analytics because the experience that we're trying to create is a little new for all of us. It's something that we might have done in what I might call the merchandising era in the 50s when somebody walked into the store. But now that we're doing it with data, we have to relearn some instincts. And I think some of our instincts have gone a little off track. Slide. The typical process that I've seen today and that many of us have experienced is starting with data, creating insights from the data, and then finally deciding what customer action makes the most sense. Slide. What happens when you do a data-first perspective is you end up with a bunch of interesting facts, not too unlike a Snapple bottle cap. It's great to know that vultures can fly for 6 hours without flapping their wings, but what does that really tell you about the customers? Usually it doesn't tell you a lot because you started with just looking for random insights. And when you take a whole bunch of data and you throw it together and you're hoping something magical is going to come out of it, quite often not. You're not going to end up with exactly what you're hoping for. Slide. Instead, keep in mind that marketing isn't math. It's still a customer on the other end of this equation. So when you start with data, you're starting with math. And marketing is really about the customer. And it's about how you can create a customer-centric experience, because when the customer wins, you win for the most part. And so if you can create a great experience, it's always going to be around that customer experience for the most part. Slide. So let's reverse that equation. Let's start with the customer and/or the customer action first, the desired outcome or our objective that we're supposed to try to enhance or excite or create an intelligent experience for the customer. Find out where we can get those sources. What kind of insights do we need to help us understand what will work and what won't work? And then find the data that will help you either allow you to make that decision or create actions that will create data that will allow you to make those decisions and make intelligent, profitable decisions for your business as well as for your customer. Slide. Now, the customer today, as we've all know, is always addressable. And sometimes this opportunity is taken too much of advantage. We think of it as a mass market opportunity, doing volume marketing. It works at first. We have a huge email list. We see that email marketing works, or at least is the most responsive of our techniques, which generally makes sense. But as an example, then, we say, let's do another one. Let's do another one. And what we end up doing by accident is decreasing the effectiveness of this. This is really almost a product-centric or mass market perspective of the way to try to generate sales. What we do is we inundate them with upgrade opportunities or book this trip now. And if you do too many of them, you're essentially destroying the value of that list. And then unfortunately, the problem begets its own problem once again, that we end up thinking, well, it used to work, let's just get more fresh names. And in truth, we're just beating up an email list, and there's going to only be a certain amount of water that whole jug can hold, and at a certain point there's too many leaks in it for it to hold enough water for it to be truly effective. And so we have to make sure that we're very careful not to become or slip into a mass market concept in a lot of equations as it relates to digital. Next. So pre-planned campaigns are less effective, and that really was a great point of Kevin's question when you think about real time. In this digital world, customers are almost not aware, but they're receiving real-time experiences every day. My experience as I walk off a plane in Phoenix, Arizona with my smartphone and I turn it on is I instantly know what the weather forecast is in Phoenix. I didn't ask my phone anything. I didn't tell it to do anything. It just did it. That's a very simple example of how effective real-time events are happening for customers in the real world. They're starting to grow to expect experiences that speak to what their actions are, or at least are more highly relevant to them. So we have to think about how to provide a very real-time experience, not something that we planned a month and a half ago as an email campaign, sent to them 2 weeks after that, and then hope that we get a response the next day or over the next week over a series of emails. We need to think about how that website reacts to that customer, or at least how the email would be sent out based on a customer's action, and make that more intelligent and effective. Next. So the travel and hospitality industry has a huge advantage. It is the originator of the concept of loyalty campaigns and loyalty programs for the most part. And as an example, most of the time you have the inverse of most other industries in that people wish to express their membership number or wish to sign in. They know behind that wall there's a bunch of opportunities for them to capture special benefits or upgrades, or at least understand where they sit in the program. So trying to make sure that you promote loyalty login, and it's very easy to do. You can indicate through most platforms, and certainly through ours, that returning users who did log in previously into a loyalty club, you can pop a light box here as an example to have them log in. That means now you're even more intelligent. You have access to an incredible wealth of data that'll make the experience that much more informed. And as I said, customers wish to share this information with you because they know that there's perks and benefits that they wish to either get access to or make sure they apply their actions to during the transaction event that they're potentially about to enter. Next. And you can use loyalty to your advantage then, obviously. Once you have them logged in or you can identify them, you can start promoting things. You can talk about elite status qualification. You can start talking about seat upgrade opportunities as an example. Things that put the expression of you know who they are in front of them real time is very, very important to this new consumer. They're thinking about the fact that I don't want to have to do work to try to find out information that you should already know about me and be surfacing. It used to be that we could have the patience as a consumer to, oh, I'll log in and I'll find this. That no longer exists. We expect websites, digital interaction to happen intelligently for us. And so the more that you can service intelligent interaction means, once again, that you're relying on data and analytics to surface this information. The expression big data is really just the modern version of personalization. It's taking advantage of information that you have to create a more intelligent or personalized experience. You have a great opportunity, as an example, sitting in your back pocket with loyalty. Next. And leveraging location. For the 32%, I think, of you that it was that are taking advantage of geo, congratulations. This is a huge opportunity. Simple things. This doesn't need to be haunting or fearful for the consumer, or even creepy as sometimes expressed, but you know in their IP address up to upwards of 90% reliability. That's before you even know what their previous activities have been with your website, where they're logging in from, or where they're browsing from. And so when they do that, you should be able to leverage that and pivot on that information. This example is simple enough. Travel deals highlighted from Philadelphia. So these travel deals are keyed off of the fact that these are prices that are relevant, or packages that are relevant to the Philadelphia market. Suddenly, I don't have to do as much work. I'm taking a few clicks out of this equation and surfacing information that is going to be more intriguing and intelligent to me so that I can quickly engage with you. The easier you make it for your consumer to engage with your website, the more likely they are going to return. They're always going to shop, but if an experience goes smoothly and effectively and they trust the brand that they're working with, and a lot of that trust develops through intelligent interaction, they're going to return almost on their own. That experience was positive enough for them to warrant returning. Next. So you can imagine, I'm coming from Chicago. You can actually take the location, but also the weather as well. We know that in certain cases, you can take advantage of the weather, as an example, then say, if the temperature is beneath 30 degrees, promote this banner. And you could set it up as a year-long campaign. If the weather temperature is underneath 30 degrees, promote something that's relevant to that marketplace. So Example, ready to defrost. All these trips are from Chicago to the Caribbean or the Bahamas or Hawaii, and they're intelligently merchandised because now, instead of having to input all this information into your order entry system, as an example, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a flight, you're starting to take a lot of the work potentially out of my hands, which is a big benefit to the consumer. They might not realize how easy it is, but they certainly realize when they go to a competitive site or they try to do research and they have to do so much more work that they had a better experience where they were, and that's what makes them more likely to return. Next. And then this sounds simple, but it's challenging for a lot of websites to do this. Maintaining the send trail. What do I mean by that? The inbound link and the source of traffic to your website informs you in an incredible amount of ways, and you need to have your website be able to react to that in real time. In this example, Ebates, somebody was shopping at Ebates and saw a promotional offer, and when they clicked on that, they came to the website. Now, in a lot of ways, if you don't maintain that send trail, if you don't say Ebates, welcome eBay shopper, or an example of if I came from a specific Google ad or something else that had copy on it, and I don't translate that to the experience on the website, and not just a landing page, through the experience. As an example, if it was AARP members save 20%, you know what, I'd like to have them feel that confident all the way through the experience. I would hate if I was an AARP member to look at that on the first landing page and not see that information consistently through the website. That starts to push my trust barrier a little bit, and my fear gets up. But if you were able to make sure that that message was consistently happening, I would have more trust with you as a shopper. And what's important then is that if you don't have that, people get lost. They have to wait till the end of the transaction. They might need to enter a promo code. Things that create a challenge for the consumer. Once you create questions in their mind, they're going to slow down. They're going to open another tab. They're going to question what they're doing and whether or not it has a good investment of their time effort. And they might go someplace else. This is challenging for some people to execute, but it's extremely important. When you do it well, you create a highly relevant experience that makes the consumer feel comfortable, relaxed as they go through that experience. And Lord knows, in the travel and hospitality industry, we have enough sources that responding to them intelligently is going to be critical for our business, even if it's an email campaign. You don't want to have somebody, it's a little bit like having a cocktail party, greeting the person at the door with saying, "Hi, Bob, how are you?" and then seeing them later at the cocktail table and forgetting their name and not knowing who they are. That's what a website experience is if you don't maintain that send trail. And that's when customers, they don't even know how to express it, but they feel uncomfortable and they decide to bail. Next. And take advantage of what they've done previously on your website. It doesn't have to require the fact that you've logged in to the website previously for this to have happen. You have this data in session. You can use a first-party cookie and be able to store this data and take advantage of it. As an example, in example one, in a prior session, we know that they've been looking at travel deals to the island. So why not promote things from Washington that are relevant to what areas they've been looking? In one case, maybe they were looking at the Grand Canyon. You could promote things like that. In this case, as example number one shows, they've been looking at the islands of the Caribbean and thinking about maybe making a trip down there. Make it easy for them to come back. And real-time data is just as, if not more important. In this example, somebody's adding 2 children to their trip in example number 2. Immediately, I should be able to use my website and leverage that knowledge to be able to promote family deals. I now have a whole different parameter on this. As an example of how valuable the real-time data is, imagine this customer in prior sessions had always booked business trip deals, single traveler, 1-room hotel in business locations. If I decided to just only leverage that data, I might be promoting everything about internet access and conference rooms and availability, missing the fact that he or she put 2 children in and not leveraging that real-time data. Next. And sometimes it's also the way you deliver the message, and I think we're all guilty of this. We all think of it more from the product and from the revenue perspective. In this example, upgrade to business class for $35. So to me, as a consumer, when I see that information, and hopefully it's intelligently presented based on previous experience or availability on the flight, but I see $35, not only because it's bolded, but that's the value proposition. Pay me $35 and I'll get to upgrade to business class. So somehow the benefit here is paying money. Next. What if you leveraged it and changed it around? What if we talked about the benefit? How about 4 more inches of legroom? I would love that. That sounds great. It's a heck of a lot better than saying, how would you like to pay me $35? So if you can create a tailored message in that space, sure, the next page would describe to them the benefits of getting 4 more inches of legroom on a particularly long flight. I'm going to suddenly say, you know what, it's worth $35. But if you start with the $35, I'm already working that equation down. But once again, doing it intelligently and seeing what works. Which one of these two situations work? When I did $35 versus 4 inches of legroom. You've got to test that out and figure out what works for your customers. Next. So another great example is knowing the device. And we happen to do a quarterly report on statistics that we capture from over 100 million visits to e-commerce related sites. And if you take a look, website from 2011, the traffic that we saw in Q4 of 2011, 92% of it was traditional, which means desktop and laptop. 4% was tablet, 4% was smartphone. Go ahead and flip 1 year ahead, and suddenly 2012, Christmas Day, we had 68% of the visitors were coming through a laptop or desktop. 16% were on a tablet and 16% on a smartphone. It went from roughly 8% of total website traffic to almost a third of website traffic is coming from a tablet or smartphone. I'm sure if you've ever used your smartphone or a tablet online, whether it's a travel experience or for almost any experience online, it can be one of the most frustrating things in the world. So you have to be very considerate, whether you're utilizing responsive design, using an application, making sure that you are aware of the device so that you can create a better experience, whether that means creating larger touch links, as an example, on a tablet or smartphone. The most frustrating thing in the world is being certain you hit the right link and end up hitting the one right beneath it or the one right above it. Now, it sounds like a simple thing, but we are excessively impatient online. If you think about your experience in a store, you might walk around a store for 10 minutes trying to look for something and telling the nice people that work there that you don't need their help. Online, you click on the wrong place once, you're probably swearing at your device and or whichever website you're going to or on, and you're already started a negative experience just on such a simple thing as usability. Next. And knowing the device means creating calls to action that are relevant and they're more prominent. Larger navigation is very critical. Larger text fields, because we can have the same experience there of having the trouble of hitting the right one. Increase all call to action. Make the buttons bigger. Keep in mind, I don't have a mouse anymore. It is not a precise activity. And as a matter of fact, there's no rollover either. It's very binary. It's touch or don't touch. So it's very important. And then obviously making finger-friendly swiping and movements available, as you can see there by that arrow. These are all considerations that your website should respond to when a customer is coming from a tablet or a laptop or desktop or a smartphone. They're critically important. Next. And what's important is I've provided you with a large list of items that we see in working with our clients are opportunities in helping them create solutions to these challenges based on data and based on information that you have in the session or based on previous activity, which is very, very important. So you can create a very dynamic booking experience that allows them to feel comfortable and makes you look like a great purveyor of simple and easy experiences. But like anything, you have to start small. It would be challenging to just throw this laundry list of things at you and say, go ahead, start tomorrow. But starting small is the first step. And what can happen next when you start small is you just have to simply think of existing customer segments that are important to you. Don't think of it as the mass market. Have some guts. Be a customer-centric marketer. Don't tank your response rates. Think of a segment that is underperforming, whether it's a geography, whether it's a demographic, whether it's a device, and take a look. Maybe it's certain packages that aren't working, and you have to figure out which customers aren't responding to it. But think of the customer segments that matter. Think about where you want to affect them and start figuring out how to measure and affect that and come up with options. And when you do that, some incredible things can happen. And certainly not every time you try it is it successful. As a matter of fact, more often than not, your attempts are actually going to not succeed. And when that happens, you might think of that as not getting any revenue, but in truth, you've eliminated options that aren't viable to your business. And that adds to your intellectual capital for future tests and actually makes you even more efficient going forward. But when you find those winners, the ability to take advantage of those right away and then move on to the next one. Iterate, iterate, iterate. Even on something that doesn't win, iterate and find out how to make it better is what's critically important. Once you start getting momentum, big things can happen. Next. This is an example of a campaign of one of our clients that we've worked with for a number of years. They started out, if you take a look on the far left in October of 2009, with campaigns that they were testing. There was 31 that they were doing basically on essentially a monthly basis. And when they were doing this, they started getting experience. What was interesting is more and more people got involved. Not every one of those 31 was a winner, but every single one of those 31 was valuable information. And they started finding winners, and they started rolling those winners out to the business and finding ways to optimize segments so that they started performing better. And when they did that, they started getting more creative. And as you can see, there's a direct correlation. As they started ramping more and more campaigns and implementing them successfully, they started directly affecting their incremental revenue. And this is actually, all this data has been validated by their internal analysts at our client. And over time, you can see, by the time we reach November of 11, and we'll be updating this slide shortly coming later this year, they were generating $125 million in incremental revenue from creating these concurrent campaigns that were targeted at segments and usability on the website that all started with 31 and ended up over 150 elements that they were constantly testing or delivering to a specific segment. That shows that when you do this, great things can happen, but you have to start small. And just as important, the sooner you start, the sooner you'll have that intellectual capital in your organization, and you'll be able to start improving your results. Next. So here's some available resources. I encourage you to stop by our website and take a look. Thank you very much for your time today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kurt. I've been busily jotting down notes here because here at Tnooz we have email campaigns, and I'm sure we could learn an awful lot from some of the things that you've been discussing. So it's great that the content has been so brilliant on this webinar. Unfortunately, we do only have a couple of minutes. We're always very conscious of everybody's time, so we're going to run through some quick ones here that we've had in from the audience and some from Jean and myself, if Jean wants to join as well. One of the things that struck me, Kurt, when you were talking about the scent trail, and there's so much of this is around, the positioning of how you get these messages out. I mean, one of the things that on the scent trail is that, if you're working with a partner, does it actually sometimes mess with the user experience of a site, of the eventual site that you're sending people to, or is that something that you need to take into consideration?
It definitely can have an effect. If you aren't, number one, obviously tracking, which I'm assuming most of the people there would be tracking on this call, the results that would happen from that. But just as importantly, if it is a trusted partner, having a handshake experience, whether it's American Airlines and making sure their experience with Avis is relevant. If I come in looking at a vacation package, don't show me all these luxury cars. Maybe show me SUVs and small vehicles, so that don't make me do so much work for you. And so I think those types of handoff experiences are, one, critical to success as a partnership, but just as importantly, critical to success in terms of making the experience very simple and positive for the customer.
Sure, and I mean, just as a follow-up to that one, Kurt, and maybe Robert wants to chime in as well. I mean, often with so much of this, it appears to be a design issue. It's also a data collection issue, but also I suspect it's also getting the copy right, copy being the word that we use for marketing messages, I suppose. I mean, is one that needs to come as the primary technique that you need to understand, or are they all just kind of flowing together?
Well, you definitely should, where and if possible, you should definitely reflect personalized messages to that type of handoff. And copy is a critical piece of that. Reflecting that, as I said, it's almost like a cocktail party. If I meet you at the door with making myself feel very familiar and knowing you, and then suddenly I don't know you and the experience gets kind of awkward, that's a challenge. So creating the right language that helps them understand the relationship between the partner or the link, and recognizing that link is really important. It makes you feel intelligent. It makes you express yourself as being more intelligent, which provides confidence. But just as importantly, it provides a great deal of comfort to the consumer as they go through the experience.
Well, and if I can add something, a lot of sites will add filtering criteria. One major OTA that that comes to mind. You can select green hotels, which is terrific, but all you get is a list of hotels, and some of them do not look very green, and there's no reference to was this certified by someone, was there some level, or did the hotel just check a box? You don't really know, and it doesn't really provide additional information, and there's no sort of customized information. The person who's looking for green hotels is looking for a green hotel, and you have a responsibility to communicate valuable, pertinent information for that. And then the same thing happens. You click on honeymoon, you may wind up on a landing page. That's great. It may talk all about honeymoons, but then you get to the website and there's nothing, right? And so that whole experience really needs to be considered of what pages are landing on, and what is the navigation process through the site. And it may be you need your navigation channel to have a honeymoon track, as well as a family track, as well as a LGBT track, whatever those cases may be, a meetings track, to make sure that those interactions and those scenarios work for that variety of personas who are your primary market segments.
Great point.
Okay, great point indeed. Just a couple of audience questions before we wrap up. Nikolaus Stathis asks, do you think a loyalty scheme would actually work in a 5-property hotel business? I imagine, Robert, this one's a good one for you to hit us with.
Sure. I think it depends on the profile of the guests. If those 5 properties are roadside properties, or at airports or something like that, where there may or may not be repeat guests. I mean, from a roadside property, you may have people who are traveling by car. I ran marketing for a budget motel chain for a while, and we wound up with a very, very basic loyalty program that worked very, very well, because it worked for those particular individuals. And it wasn't a huge giveaway. It was just, it wound up providing some very specific values for what our best client was, who would be using that. So yeah, for a 5-property chain, it may work very well. It could be if you have eco lodges scattered around the world, that's great. Stay at a different one. So yeah, I think anything that engages that person, and if you have a grouping of hotels to lead them to want to stay at another one where it makes logical sense, that's great.
Okay, thanks, Rob. And Louise Costa asks, how will customer concerns around privacy and access to personal data in the future kind of affect all this? And he also says, what about the so-called VRM, the vendor relationship management? So, Kurt, to you first. I mean, privacy concerns, it's personal data. Do people want to be hit with so much of this? During this particular journey, or does the evidence suggest that actually, if it's timed right, if the messaging is right, that they often don't care because they feel that they're getting a decent service as a result?
Yeah, more often than not, if you're doing it intelligently, and obviously that's a big word, intelligently, the consumer feels rewarded because it's painless and it's easier for them. If you suddenly are starting to use their name too often, or say things like, I see that you're interested in, and start having awkward conversational expressions, that can create fear in the eyes of the consumer. But if you just make this experience simpler and more intuitive based on the knowledge, it shouldn't be an issue at all. As a matter of fact, the results that we've seen from most of our clients are that they don't really have any uptick in concerns. If anything, the experience becomes more positive, because if you're doing it for the right reasons, if you're doing it to make it easier for them to work, making it easier so they have to do less work on your behalf, if you do it with the right philosophy, it's only a benefit to the consumer in the long run.
Yeah,
okay,
I can't echo that enough. I spent 8 years with Four Seasons, and Izzy Sharp built that company on the golden rule, treating others the way you'd want to be treated, and that applied to customers, to vendors, to everyone. And the key is dealing with them respectfully and truly trying to provide them with value. People will certainly trade privacy for convenience, but they will also be very, very angry if you abuse that privilege. They give you that private information in the sense of trust, and if you abuse that trust, they will seek retribution.
It sounds rather scary. Just a final one from me, fellas. Obviously, always conscious of people's time, and thank you everybody that's stuck around. Mobile has just kind of made this so much more interesting from our perspective at Tnooz, but from a company's perspective, it opens up so many opportunities. And one of the interesting ones that I always kind of keep one eye on is this idea of geofencing now, and what mobile is doing, and the opportunities that people have. I mean, Kurt or Rob, do you have any specific examples or any kind of thing that you can share around how the mobile and geofencing and that kind of areas of CRM are really kind of forcing companies to think about this in a really serious way, because we are always connected travelers now, after all?
Yeah, I mean, the great example, which actually addresses the last question as well as this question as well, Kevin. Hotel Tonight. Look what they do. If you haven't downloaded their app, try it. At noon every day, you can find hotels if you happen to be in one of the served cities. What they do is they actually use your geolocation to serve up hotels. If it happens to be an area like New York, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, they're taking advantage of the fact they know where you are, and they're fully disclosing the fact that they're doing that. And they're creating a great experience. I don't have to say, oh, I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, submit. They just say, here's some hotels in Philadelphia. Would you want a different city, or is this city okay? But they're already making some assumptions on your behalf and creating a great experience. So there's a great example of how to take advantage of that information. And what's interesting is the customers don't mind. The customers appreciate it, and they keep coming back. And those experiences are what the customer is going to demand from you. It's kind of sad that the smartphone, while the smallest of the interfaces, can end up having the best experience for a customer because we haven't executed online some of the similar philosophies in terms of taking advantage of that information. Just make it easier for the customer. And the companies that are going to succeed are the companies that do that and make it easier for them.
Indeed.
Yeah, and
Robert, you were going to chime in there?
Yeah. A friend of mine, Lauren Gray with Ocean Properties, has a great story with some testing he's been doing with social in terms of driving bar business. And he goes and he's working with Foursquare, he's working with Twitter, and basically triggering specials to individuals that he knows have checked in at competitive bars and saying that the first round is on him, or the person who gets whatever. He's triggered these from a mobile device standing in a competitor's bar, knowing that some of these people who he doesn't know personally, when they checked into their hotel, they asked them for for authorization. They go find that they were friend, follow them on Foursquare, that sort of thing. They trigger it. He'd see 8, 10 people stand up, close out their checks, walk down the road to his bar, and go in. So I think we're just at the beginning of it. It's some really remarkable things going to happen, particularly on the in-destination experience in terms of specials, distressed inventory, that sort of thing. I've got to think hotels can be able to leverage this substantially with their partners. If it's tickets to a baseball game that night, whatever, that all those various groups who are looking to fill additional seats or move additional product are looking for someone who's staying in a hotel or someone like that. That's a great demographic for them to target.
Okay, and so a final one, and this goes to you, Kurt. You get the last word today. I mean, as Robert just said there, we're on the crest of some really interesting things now. I mean, at a more fundamental corporate level, what is it, do you think, that is preventing or inhibiting travel companies from really diving in and doing some of this stuff? Is it just an awareness of the ability to do so? Is it resources, or is it something else?
Yeah, I think it's three primary things. The first is just we all default to what's naturally instinctive, and I think this new age of big data and customer personalization is challenging for a lot of people, and we default to kind of our mass market instincts. So one, getting off your butt and doing something and creating a customer-centric experience needs to be a mission. Two, and this is a big piece of it, a lot of people aren't aware of the technical opportunities they have to use platforms and solutions such as Monetate to make these experiences much easier and not having to go through the burden of going through IT constantly and thinking of long lag times. If you can understand that you can do this quickly and iterate through solutions out there, you're going to be able to understand that, this is much easier than I thought. It's a bit of a fear factor and an experience factor of having to manage an experience going through IT. And the last thing is just doing it. And I know that they all kind of come in there under the same flag, but you have to be customer-centric and make a commitment to trying it. You have to find solutions that'll make it easier for you to execute so the execution doesn't become a barrier. And then you need to just dive into the data and get some of that information and make something happen. I encourage anybody who's listening to think of a small project that would make a difference in the business. Give it a shot. Make it a personal mission and do something about it. Find a solution that will help you execute that concept quickly and easily, because if you find that solution and you find the motivation and energy to do it, you're going to have incredible rewards, and you're going to enjoy yourself as a marketer and as a business manager much more than just trying to do mass market email campaigns.
Brilliant. What a great sentence to end on there, Kurt. I mean, I must say I've learned an awful lot this afternoon listening to this. It's been absolutely fascinating. So, and we may not have had many questions, but we did have a lot of people just pinging us saying, absolutely brilliant presentations. Lots of people asking when the presentation and the video will be hosted. So. I will repeat again. So we'll have the full webinar and the slides from this up on tnooz.com hopefully within the next 12 hours or so. It just depends on processing time. So thank you very much for everybody for listening, but obviously big thank you to our panel today, Kurt from Monetate and Robert from RockCheetah, and obviously especially to Monetate for supporting this webinar and really shedding some light on what I think is an area that, as Robert was saying, it's kind of untapped. People are only really starting to get their heads around it, and I still think personally mobile has driven a lot of this because they realise there are so many opportunities there. So thanks again to Kurt and to Rob. Thanks everybody for listening in. We hope you've enjoyed the webinar. Thanks again to Monetate. Have an enjoyable remainder of your respective days. Thanks ever so much.
The organizer has ended